An alien princess announced the sale of her little baby, and an old queen woman bought the baby. The purple sky of Zirion burned with the light of dying suns. Princess Zalara stood at the edge of her crumbling palace, holding her newborn daughter close to her chest. The baby's skin shimmered with the same silver patterns that marked all Etherian royalty. But these beautiful markings might soon be the last of their kind. "My lady, we must leave now," urged Commander Thex, his voice heavy with worry. Behind him, the sounds of approaching war machines grew louder. The Dominion forces were only hours away from reaching the capital city. Zalara looked down at her sleeping child. The baby was so small, so perfect, so innocent of the terrible fate that awaited their entire race. For 300 years, the Etherians had fought against the mechanical armies of the Dominion. Now, with most of their people dead from the plague that had swept through their worlds, this war was finally coming to an end. "She is the last pure-blood heir," Zalara whispered, touching the crystal pendant around her neck. "The sacred bloodline that has protected our people for 1,000 generations flows through her veins." The princess had spent sleepless nights thinking about this moment. Every option led to the same dark conclusion. If she kept her daughter, both of them would die when the Dominion found them. If she sent the child away with Etherian survivors, they would all be hunted down within days. The mechanical soldiers never stopped, never tired, never showed mercy. But there was one place the Dominion rarely looked, one group of beings they considered too weak and scattered to be a threat. "The humans, prepare my ship," Zalara said, her voice steady despite the pain in her heart. "We go to Heaven's Rest." Commander Thex stepped forward. "My lady, surely you cannot mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." Zalara's eyes glowed with the inner light of her people. "Ready the ship. We leave in 1 hour." The journey to Heaven's Rest took 3 days through dangerous space. The neutral moon orbited between human and alien territories, making it the perfect place for those who lived outside the law. Pirates, traders, smugglers, and worse gathered there to buy and sell things that could not be found anywhere else. Zalara had never been to such a place. Royal Etherians lived in crystal palaces surrounded by gardens that sang with telepathic flowers. They ate food that tasted like starlight and drank water that sparkled with healing properties. Heaven's Rest was the opposite of everything she had ever known. The market square was a dirty, crowded place filled with creatures from dozens of different worlds. Strange smells mixed in the air. Voices shouted in languages she had never heard. Machines beeped and clicked while their owners argued over prices. "Are you sure about this?" Princess asked Captain Joruk, who had flown her ship to this place. He was one of the few Etherian pilots still alive, and his loyalty to the royal family ran deep. Zalara nodded, though her hand shook as she held her baby. "The prophecy speaks of a bridge between worlds. It says that only those with stubborn fire in their hearts can raise the child who will unite the scattered peoples. Our people have many gifts, but we are not stubborn. We bend like grass in the wind. But humans—" She paused, watching a group of human traders arguing loudly with a tall, blue-skinned alien. "Humans never know when to give up." She walked to the center of the market square and climbed onto a wooden platform, used by traders to show their goods. Her appearance caused immediate silence. Etherian royalty was rare enough, but a princess carrying a baby was something no one had ever seen. "In this place, I am Princess Zalara of the House of Morning Stars," she announced, her voice carrying the musical tones of her people. "I come here today to offer something that has never been offered before." The crowd pressed closer. Aliens of all kinds pushed forward to hear better. In the back, she could see human faces among the others, their expressions curious and alert. "I offer for sale the last heir of the Etherian bloodline," Zalara continued, her voice breaking slightly. "My daughter carries the genetic codes of our most ancient families. She has telepathic abilities that could save civilizations or destroy them. The bidding starts at 1 million galactic credits." The marketplace erupted in chaos. Voices shouted numbers in different languages. Wealthy collectors waved their hands in the air. Corporate representatives spoke rapidly into communication devices, calling their bosses on distant worlds. Near the back of the crowd, Dr. Elena Vasquez felt her heart break. The elderly human woman had come to Heaven's Rest looking for rare plants. For her research, she had not expected to witness something so terrible and beautiful at the same time. Elena was 68 years old. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her clothes were practical rather than fashionable. She had been a xenobiologist for 40 years, studying alien life forms and helping different species understand each other. But more than that, she had been a grandmother to 3 beautiful children until the war took them away. The bidding quickly rose to astronomical numbers. A Centauri crime lord offered 5 million credits. A corporate representative from the mining guilds bid 8 million. A mysterious figure in dark robes bid 12 million without showing his face. Elena thought about her small research station on New Eden. She thought about her life savings, her research grants, and the pension she would never need if she spent it all today. She thought about the alien princess standing on the platform with tears streaming down her face. Most of all, she thought about the tiny baby who would grow up as a weapon, a tool, or a prize for whoever won this terrible auction. 20 million. Credits, Elena called out in a clear, steady voice. The crowd turned to look at her. She was obviously not wealthy like the others. Her bid was probably everything she owned in the universe. 25 million, shouted the crime lord. 30 million, Elena replied without hesitation. The bidding continued for another hour. One by one, the other bidders dropped out. The numbers grew to high even for wealthy criminals and powerful corporations. In the end, only Elena remained. Having bid everything she had and borrowed against everything she might ever have. Sold. Princess Zalara said quietly to the human woman. Elena made her way through the crowd to the platform. Up close, she could see that Princess Zalara was very young, probably no older than Elena's own granddaughter had been. The baby in her arms was beautiful, with silver markings that seemed to shift and dance in the light. Why? Zalara asked as Elena climbed onto the platform. Why would you spend everything for a child that is not even your species? Elena looked down at the baby, who had opened her large, violet eyes and was staring up at her with ancient wisdom. Because, Elena said simply, she needs a grandmother and I need a granddaughter. Sometimes the universe has a way of fixing to broken hearts at the same time. Princess Zalara pressed the crystal pendant into Elena's weathered hands. This contains the memories of our people, she whispered. And this child. The prophecy says she will build a bridge between worlds, but only if she is raised by those who have stubborn fire in their hearts. Elena took the baby in her arms and felt a warmth she had not experienced since her own grandchildren died. Then I guess we'll just have to prove that old humans sang true, she said with a gentle smile. The impossible just takes a little longer. As Elena walked away with her new granddaughter, neither of them knew that this simple act of love would change the fate of entire civilizations. But perhaps that is how the most important moments always begin, not with grand plans or cosmic destiny, but with one person deciding to care for another, no matter how impossible it might seem. Elena's research station on New Eden was nothing like the crystal palaces of Etherian royalty. It was a simple collection of buildings surrounded by vast fields of grain and vegetables. The air smelled of growing things and rich earth. For the first time in days, Elena felt like she could breathe properly. She carried the alien baby into her small home and looked around with new eyes. The place had been perfect for a lonely old scientist, but now she needed to make it safe for a child, who might be the most important being in the galaxy. Well, little one, Elena said softly, looking down at the baby in her arms. I suppose we both have a lot to learn. The baby's violet eyes seemed to focus on Elena's face. For a moment, Elena felt a strange warmth in her mind, like someone had lit a gentle candle in a dark room. She smiled, remembering what Princess Zalara had said about telepathic abilities. I think I'll call you Lyra. Elena decided. It's the name of a constellation that helped lost travelers find their way home. Seems fitting. The first weeks were the hardest Elena had ever experienced. Etherian babies were not like human babies. Lyra grew faster than any human child, and her needs were completely different. She could not drink human milk or eat human food. Elena spent countless hours in her laboratory, using her xenobiology knowledge to create special formulas that would keep Lyra healthy. During those long nights, Elena often thought about her own grandchildren. Sarah had been 6 years old when the mining colony was attacked. Tommy was 8, and little Maria was just 4. Elena had been away on a research mission when it happened. By the time she got the news and traveled back, there was nothing left to save. That had been 3 years ago. Since then, Elena had lived alone on New Eden, focusing on her research and trying to forget the sound of children's laughter. Now, watching Lyra sleep in the small crib she had built, Elena felt something she thought was gone forever. Hoped out as the weeks passed. Lyra began to show remarkable abilities. She could sense Elena's emotions, often crying when Elena was sad and cooing happily when Elena smiled. More surprisingly, she seemed to understand the local wildlife in ways that amazed Elena. New Eden was home to many gentle creatures. There were golden birds that sang in harmony at sunrise, small, furry animals called thorn bunnies that ate the weeds in Elena's garden, even wild deer that came to drink from the stream near Elena's house. At first, Elena thought it was coincidence when the animals began gathering around wherever Lyra was, but soon it became clear that the baby was somehow communicating with them. The golden birds would perch on the edge of her crib and sing soft lullabies. The thorn bunnies would bring her small flowers. The deer would stand guard outside the house. At night, "You're making friends already," Elena told Lyra one morning as a family of thorn bunnies played near the baby's blanket. "In the garden. That's very human of you, you know. We have a talent for getting along with everyone." By the time Lyra was 6 months old, she looked like a human toddler. Her silver markings had faded to barely visible patterns that could be hidden with the right clothes. Her violet eyes had shifted to a more human-like blue-gray color. Elena was amazed at how quickly Lyra was adapting. But it was not just Lyra who was changing. Elena found herself becoming more protective, more determined, and more creative than she had been in years. She installed hidden security systems around her property. She created false identity documents for Lyra using her old diplomatic connections. She even learned basic combat skills by studying old military training videos. "I may be an old woman," Elena muttered as she practiced shooting with an energy weapon behind her house, "but nobody is taking my granddaughter away from me." The crystal pendant that Princess Zalara had given her proved to be more valuable than Elena had imagined. When she touched it while holding Lyra, she could see flashes of Etherean memories. She learned about their culture, their language, and their way of understanding the universe. More importantly, she learned about their fears, their hopes, and their deep love for their children. This knowledge helped Elena teach Lyra about her heritage while also giving her human values. Elena would tell stories about brave Etherean warriors and wise human diplomats. She taught Lyra to be proud of both sides of who she was becoming. One evening, as Elena was reading to 2-year-old Lyra from a book of human fairy tales, the little girl looked up with those intelligent eyes and spoke her first words, "Grandma." "Elena," Lyra said in perfect standard human, "why do some stories have happy endings and others don't?" Elena's heart nearly stopped. Lyra had never heard anyone call her Grandma Elena before, but somehow she knew that was the right thing to say. "Well, sweetheart," Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady, "I think it depends on whether the people in the story keep trying to make things better, even when it seems impossible. Like you did when you saved me." Lyra asked. Elena hugged the little girl close. "Like we're doing right now, every day, just by taking care of each other." As Lyra grew older, she began helping Elena with the farm work. She had an amazing ability to make plants grow faster and stronger just by touching them. She could predict the weather by watching the behavior of birds. She could calm frightened animals with a gentle touch. But more than her alien abilities, Lyra showed the kinds of qualities that Elena recognized as deeply human. She was curious about everything, always asking questions and wanting to learn more. She was brave when facing new challenges, even if she was scared. Most importantly, she cared about everyone around her, from Elena to the smallest insects in the garden. Elena began teaching Lyra about the wider galaxy through her old diplomatic files and research materials. She explained about the war between the Etherians and the Dominion, about the different species and cultures that existed among the stars, and about humanity's role as mediators and peacemakers. Remember, Lyra, Elena would say during their evening talks, your mother's people and their enemies both think there are only two ways to solve problems: fight or surrender. But humans have always believed there's a third way. We find it by being stubborn enough to keep looking when everyone else gives up. One night, when Lyra was 3 years old, Elena woke up to find the little girl standing at the window, staring up at the stars with a worried expression. What's wrong, sweetheart? Elena asked. I can feel them looking for me, Lyra said quietly. The metal people and the star people. They're getting closer. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known this day might come, but she had hoped they would have more time. Don't worry, Elena said, kneeling down to hug Lyra. We humans have been dealing with impossible situations for thousands of years. We'll figure this out together. As Elena looked out at the peaceful fields of New Eden, she began making plans. She had contacts throughout the galaxy from her diplomatic days. She had resources and safe houses that few people knew about. Most importantly, she had something that both the Etherians and the Dominion underestimated: the stubborn human refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. Come on, little star, Elena said, using her pet name for Lyra. Let's go make some hot chocolate and talk about all the places in the galaxy where people believe in happy endings. As they walked to the kitchen together, Elena made a silent promise. No matter what came looking for them, no matter how powerful or determined their enemies might be, she would make sure Lyra had the chance to become the bridge between worlds that her mother had dreamed of. After all, Elena thought with a small smile, the impossible just takes a little longer. 5 years had passed since Elena brought Lyra to New Eden. The little alien princess had grown into a remarkable young girl who looked almost entirely human, except for the silver patterns that appeared on her skin when she used her telepathic abilities. At 8 years old, Lyra was as tall as a human 12-year-old, but her mind was even more advanced than her body. Elena watched from the kitchen window as Lyra worked in the garden with their animal friends. 3 golden birds perched on her shoulders while she carefully planted new seeds. A family of thorn bunnies helped by digging small holes in perfectly straight rows. Even the wild deer had learned to help by carrying water buckets in their mouths. Good morning, Grandma Elena, Lyra called out, waving at the window. The plants are telling me it's going to rain this afternoon. Should we cover the new seedlings? Elena smiled and waved back, even after 5 years. It still amazed her how naturally Lyra could communicate with all living things. But more than that, she was proud of the values Lyra had learned. The girl never used her abilities to force animals to help her. She asked politely and always made sure they were happy to assist. That sounds like a good idea, sweetheart, Elena called back. But come inside first. We need to practice your reading lesson. Lyra had an incredible mind for learning. She could read books in 5 different languages, solve mathematical problems that challenged university students, and understand scientific concepts that took Elena years to master. But Elena made sure to balance all that learning with simple human wisdom. Remember, Elena would often tell her, being smart is good, but being kind is more important. And being stubborn enough to keep trying when others give up, that's the most important thing of all. Elena had aged considerably in the past 5 years. Her hair was now completely gray, and she moved more slowly than she used to. But her mind was as sharp as ever, and her love for Lyra had given her energy she never knew she had. That morning, as they sat at the kitchen table with Lyra's books spread out between them, Elena noticed something strange. The birds outside had stopped singing. The thorn bunnies were hiding in their burrows. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. Lyra, Elena said quietly, what are the animals telling you? Lyra's eyes grew wide, and the silver patterns began to appear on her skin. They're scared, Grandma Elena, something is coming, something. That doesn't belong here. Elena felt her heart start beating faster. She had been preparing for this day for 5 years, but she had hoped it would never come. Go to your room and pack your emergency bag, she told Lyra calmly, just like we practiced. Lyra nodded and ran upstairs. Elena went to her office and activated the long-range sensors she had hidden around her property. What she saw on the screen made her blood run cold. 3 ships were approaching New Eden. One was sleek and silver, marked with the symbols of the Dominion. The other 2 were organic-looking vessels that could only belong to Etherean survivors. Both groups had found them. Elena grabbed her emergency communicator and sent coded messages to her old diplomatic contacts throughout the galaxy. If she and Lyra were going to survive what was coming, they would need all the help they could get. Lyra came back downstairs carrying a small backpack and her favorite book of human fairy tales. She looked scared but determined, just like Elena had taught her. Are they here for me? Lyra asked. Elena knelt down and took Lyra's hands in hers. Yes, sweetheart. But remember what I've always told you. There are always more options than people think. We just have to be stubborn enough to find them. The first ship to land was the Etherean vessel. Elena and Lyra watched from the window as tall, graceful figures emerged from the organic-looking craft. Their leader was a woman who looked remarkably like Princess Zalara, but older and harder. That's Commander Selen, Lyra whispered, the silver patterns glowing brighter on her skin. She's my aunt. She's angry and desperate, Elena squeezed Lyra's hand. Remember, being family doesn't automatically make someone right. You get to choose what kind of person you want to be. The Etherean delegation approached the house slowly. Elena opened the door before they could knock, with Lyra standing beside her. Commander Selen, Elena said politely, I've been expecting you. The Etherean woman's eyes immediately locked onto Lyra. Elena could see the recognition, the hope, and the fierce determination in that gaze. You are the human who bought our princess, Selen said, her voice carrying the musical tones of her people. You have raised her well, but now you must return her to us. The prophecy says she will lead us to victory against the Dominion. Our people are dying while she plays with farm animals. I'm not playing, Lyra said quietly, stepping forward. I'm learning. Grandma Elena taught me that the best leaders are the ones who understand all kinds of life, not just their own kind. Before Selen could respond, the air filled with the mechanical humming of Dominion ships, 2 large, metallic vessels descended from the sky and landed in Elena's fields. The ships were covered in weapons and painted with the black and red colors of the Machine Empire. This complicates things, Elena muttered. The Dominion soldiers who emerged from their ships looked like humans, but Elena knew they were cybernetic beings with more machine parts than organic ones. Their leader was a tall figure in black armor, whose face was hidden behind a reflective mask. I'm General Quarks of the Dominion 4th Fleet. The figure announced in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. We have come for the Etherean weapon. Surrender the child, and we will allow the rest of you to live. Elena felt Lyra move closer to her side. The silver patterns on the girl's skin were now glowing bright enough to be seen through her clothes. She's not a weapon, Elena said firmly, stepping protectively in front of Lyra. She's a child. She is a telepathic being capable of influencing entire populations, Quarks replied. Such power cannot be allowed to exist under enemy control. Commander Selen stepped forward, her own people moving into defensive positions behind her. The child belongs with her own kind. She is the rightful heir to the Etherean throne and our only hope for survival. No, Elena said, surprising everyone. She doesn't belong to either of you. She belongs to herself. The tension in the air grew thick. Elena could see both groups preparing for a fight. Etherean soldiers touched the crystal weapons at their sides. Dominion troops activated the energy cannons built into their arms. Grandma Elena, Lyra whispered, I can feel what they're all thinking. They're so scared and angry that they can't see any way out except fighting. Elena nodded. This was the moment she had been preparing Lyra for during all those years of storytelling and life lessons. Remember what I taught you about the third option? Elena asked quietly. Lyra nodded, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. Then show them what you've learned about being human, Elena said. Show them what it means to be stubborn enough to find a better way. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward, moving between the two armed groups, the silver patterns on. Her skin began to glow even brighter, but instead of looking threatening, they seemed warm and welcoming. I know you're all scared, Lyra said, her voice carrying to everyone present. I can feel it. The Etherians are scared of dying out completely. The Dominion is scared of losing control. But I learned something from my grandma Elena that maybe you don't know. She paused and looked at each group in turn. Fear doesn't have to make you fight. It can make you work together instead. My birth mother was scared when she sold me, but she chose to trust. My grandma Elena was scared when she bought me, but she chose to love. Now I'm scared too, but I choose to hope. Elena felt tears in her eyes as she watched her granddaughter stand there, small but unafraid, facing down to armies with nothing but words and courage. That's my girl. Elena whispered proudly. Show them what humans do when everyone else thinks. The situation is impossible. The silver glow round Lyra grew brighter, and Elena realized that this was just the beginning. The real test was about to come. The silver glow round Lyra continued to grow brighter as she stood between the two armies. Elena watched with a mixture of pride and terror as her granddaughter prepared to do what no one else had been able to do in 300 years of war. I want to show you something, Lyra said, her young voice carrying clearly across the field. Grandma Elena taught me that the best way to understand someone is to see through their eyes. Elena realized what Lyra was planning to do. Sweetheart, are you sure you're ready for this? She called out. Lyra looked back at Elena with those wise eyes that held both alien intelligence and human compassion. You always told me that being stubborn means trying even when you're scared. I'm very scared, Grandma Elena, but I'm going to try anyway. The silver patterns on Lyra's skin began to pulse with a gentle light. Elena felt a warm presence touch her mind, and suddenly she could sense what everyone else in the field was feeling. Commander Sellen's thoughts came first. Filled with desperate love for her dying people, Elena saw through the Etherian woman's memories, beautiful crystal cities crumbling to dust, children weakening from the plague, elders choosing to die rather than watch their culture disappear forever. Then came General Corks's thoughts, though they felt different, more mechanical. But beneath the cold logic, Elena was surprised to find genuine care for his soldiers. She saw Dominion troops who had started as ordinary people, volunteering to become part machines so they could protect their families from the chaos of galactic war. Do you feel it? Lyra asked, her voice now reaching into everyone's minds as well as their ears. Do you understand now? Elena looked around the field and saw something incredible happening. Etherian soldiers were staring at Dominion troops with expressions of shock and recognition. The machine soldiers had stopped pointing their weapons and were looking at their enemies, as if seeing them for the first time. They're just like us, whispered one young Etherian warrior. They're fighting because they're afraid of losing the people they love. A Dominion soldier removed his helmet, revealing a face that was half human, half machine. I never knew, he said, his voice filled with wonder. I never knew they had families too. But not everyone was ready to accept what Lyra was showing them. Commander Sellen shook her head violently, trying to clear the foreign thoughts from her mind. No, she shouted. These are tricks, mind games. The Dominion destroyed our worlds and killed our children. They cannot be forgiven. General Corks's mask reflected the silver light as he raised his weapon toward Lyra. The child is too dangerous. She can control minds. This proves she must be destroyed. Elena's heart stopped as she saw weapons being raised on both sides. Some soldiers had been touched by Lyra's gift of understanding, but others were too afraid or too angry to accept it. Lyra, get back, Elena shouted, running toward her granddaughter. But Lyra didn't move. Instead, she did something that made Elena's heart swell with pride and terror at the same time. The 8-year-old girl sat down cross-legged in the grass, right in the middle of the battlefield, and closed her eyes. Grandma Elena taught me about something called peaceful resistance, Lyra said calmly. even as weapons were pointed at her from both sides. She said that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to fight, even when everyone else thinks fighting is the only choice. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she recognized her own lessons being put into practice. Years of bedtime stories about human heroes who had chosen peace over violence. Months of explaining how diplomacy worked. Countless conversations about finding the third option. All of it had led to this moment. If you want to kill me, Lyra continued, I won't stop you. But before you do, I want you to feel something else. The silver glow round Lyra changed, becoming warmer and softer. This time, instead of sharing thoughts and memories, she began sharing emotions. Elena felt it first, a wave of pure love that washed over the entire battlefield. It was the love Elena felt every morning when she watched Lyra feed the thorn bunnies. It was the love Princess Zalara had felt when she sacrificed everything to save her daughter. It was the love that Etherian parents felt for their children, and the love that drove Dominion soldiers to protect their families. But more than that, it was the kind of love that Elena had taught Lyra was uniquely human, the love that reaches out to strangers, that cares for those who are different, that refuses to give up on anyone. This is what I learned from living with a human, Lyra said, her voice now filled with the warmth that Elena recognized from their quiet evenings together. Love doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be fair. It just has to be strong. Enough to keep trying when everyone else gives up. General Quarks's weapon began to shake in his hands. This is what we were fighting to protect, he said, his mechanical voice breaking. This feeling. This is what we didn't want to lose. Commander Sullen fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the realization that the love she felt for her people was the same love that drove their enemies. How can this be? She whispered. How can they feel what we feel? Elena walked slowly toward Lyra, her heart pounding with pride and fear. Around her, she could see soldiers from both armies lowering their weapons. Some were crying. Others were staring at their former enemies with new understanding. Because, Elena said, kneeling down beside Lyra and putting her arm around the glowing child, love is the one thing that every living being shares. It doesn't matter if you're made of flesh or metal, if you breathe air or energy, if you're from this world or a distant star. If you can love, then you can understand what it means to be afraid of losing what you love. Lyra opened her eyes and looked up at Elena. Did I do it right? Grandma Elena, did I find the third option? Elena hugged her granddaughter tightly. You did better than right, sweetheart. You did something I don't think anyone has ever done before. You made enemies remember that they're all just people trying to protect what matters to them. But even as Elena spoke, she could see that their victory was incomplete. While many soldiers on both sides had been moved by Lyra's demonstration, others were backing away in fear. The hardline leaders of both factions were regrouping, calling for reinforcements. The child is more dangerous than we thought, General Quarks said into his communication device. Send the entire 4th Fleet. We cannot allow this power to spread. Commander Selim was also speaking. Urgently to her ship, contact all surviving Etherian forces. The weapon is active, but it may have been compromised. We need to secure it immediately. Elena realized that instead of ending the conflict, Lyra's display of power had made both sides more determined than ever to capture or destroy her. The peaceful battlefield was about to become a war zone again, and this time, there would be nowhere to run. Lyra, Elena said quietly, I think we're about to need an even bigger third option. The young girl nodded, her silver pattern still glowing softly. I know, Grandma Elena, but I'm not scared anymore, because now I understand what you meant about being stubborn. Sometimes you have to keep trying not just when you're scared, but when everyone else thinks you've already failed. As more ships appeared in the sky above New Eden, Elena held her granddaughter close and prepared for the greatest test of human stubbornness she had ever faced. The sky above New Eden darkened with the shadows of approaching warships. Elena counted at least 20 vessels from both sides, their weapons already charging for battle. The peaceful farm that had been Lyra's home for 5 years was about to become the center of the largest space battle in recent history. But something unexpected was happening on the ground. The soldiers who had experienced Lyra's sharing of emotions were not returning to their ships. Instead, they were standing together in mixed groups, Etherian and Dominion troops talking quietly to each other, like old friends discovering they had more in common than they ever imagined. "This is mutiny," Commander Selin shouted at her warriors. "Return to your positions immediately." "With respect, Commander," said Captain Thale, one of the Etherian officers. "I think we need to hear what the child has to say before we start shooting at people who love their families just like we do." General Quarks was having similar problems. With his own troops, several Dominion soldiers had removed their helmets entirely, showing faces that were part human, part machine, but completely confused about what they had just experienced. "Sir," said Sergeant Vex, a soldier whose left arm had been replaced with mechanical parts, "I keep thinking about my daughter back home. These Etherian people, they have daughters too. How can we kill parents when we're parents ourselves?" Elena watched this remarkable scene unfold while holding Lyra close. Her granddaughter was still glowing softly, but Elena could see the effort was tiring her. Sharing emotions with so many minds at once was taking a huge toll on the 8-year-old. "I need to do more," Lyra whispered to Elena. "The people in the ships are getting ready to attack. They think their soldiers have been brainwashed. They don't understand that we just helped them remember what they were fighting for in the first place." Elena looked up at the warships hovering above them. She could see weapons turning toward the ground, preparing to fire on their own troops if necessary. The situation was about to get much worse. "Wait," Elena said, an idea forming in her mind. "Lyra, you've shown them that love is universal. But maybe we need to show them something else that humans have always believed in." "What's that?" "Grandma Elena," Elena smiled, remembering all the history lessons she had shared with Lyra over the years. "The power of choice. Every person gets to decide what kind of future they want to create." Elena stood up slowly, her old bones protesting, but her voice carried clearly across the battlefield. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez," she called out. "I was a diplomatic ambassador for the Human Colonial Council for 30 years before I retired to this farm, and I want to say something to everyone here, on the ground and in those ships." The mixed groups of soldiers turned to listen. Even the ship commanders seemed curious about what the old human woman had to say. "I've spent my whole life watching different species try to solve their problems through war," Elena continued, "and you know what I've learned. War only ends when people get tired of fighting. But peace begins when people get excited about building something better together." Lyra stood up beside Elena, her silver patterns glowing brighter. "My grandma Elena taught me that every person has the right to choose their own future. The people in those ships think they're choosing for all of you. But you're here. You felt what I shared. You get to decide what happens next." "Captain Thale, step forward. What are you asking us to do?" "I'm asking you to do what humans have always done when faced with an impossible situation," Elena said with a growing smile. "I'm asking you to be stubborn enough to try something that has never been tried before." Elena pulled out her old diplomatic communicator and activated the emergency broadcast frequency. That reached every ship in the area. Her voice now carried 2,000 of soldiers and officers on both sides. "My granddaughter isn't a weapon or a prize to be won," Elena announced. "She's a teacher. She's showing us something that my species learned a long time ago. There's always a third option, if you're brave enough to look for it." Lyra stepped closer to the communicator. "I want to make you an offer," she said, her young voice carrying the wisdom of both her alien heritage and her human upbringing. "Instead of fighting over me, let me show you what I've learned from living with humans." Elena felt her heart swell with pride as Lyra continued. "Humans believe that families aren't just about blood or DNA or even species. Families are about choosing to care for each other. What if we all chose to be family?" The response was immediate and chaotic. Ship commanders from both fleets began shouting over the communication channels. Some called it impossible, others called it treachery, but slowly other voices began to join the conversation. "I have children at home. said a Dominion pilot. If this war ended, I could go back to them. My sister died in the last battle, added an Etherian gunner, but her children are still alive. What if they could grow up without learning to hate? Elena watched as something remarkable began to happen. Soldiers started leaving their ships and coming down to the planet's surface, not to fight, but to talk, to meet the enemies they had been taught to hate and discover that they were just people trying to protect their loved ones. By sunset, the field around Elena's house looked like the strangest festival in galactic history. Etherian warriors were sharing food with Dominion troops. Officers from both sides were comparing pictures of their families. Children from nearby settlements had come to see what was happening and were playing games with soldiers who, hours before, had been preparing to kill each other. Lyra sat in the middle of it all, no longer glowing but surrounded by beings from dozens of different worlds. She was reading them stories from her collection of human fairy tales, explaining how each story taught something about finding hope in impossible situations. Elena found herself talking with Commander Selen and General Orcs, who had reluctantly come down from their ships to see what was happening to their armies. "This is madness," Selen said, but there was wonder in her voice as she watched her warriors laughing with their former enemies. "This is impossible," Orcs agreed. But Elena noticed he had removed his helmet, revealing a face that was more human than machine. "That's the point," Elena said with a tired but satisfied smile. "Humans have been doing impossible things for thousands of years. We call it hope. And it's the most stubborn force in the universe." 3 months later, Elena stood in the same field watching a very different kind of gathering. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to New Eden to sign the Haven Accords, the first peace treaty in galactic history that was built on the idea of chosen family, rather than conquered territory. Lyra, now officially the youngest ambassador in galactic history, had worked with Elena to create a new kind of diplomatic structure. Instead of nations or species making decisions for everyone, individual communities could choose how they wanted to be governed and who they wanted to consider family. Elena's health had declined rapidly during those busy months, but she refused to rest until she saw the treaty signed. Now, as she watched Lyra lead a mixed group of young people from different worlds and planting a memorial garden, Elena felt a deep sense of completion. "Grandma Elena," Lyra said, running up to her with dirt on her hands and happiness shining in her eyes. "The memorial garden is almost finished. We're planting flowers from every world that signed the treaty. Want to help us plant the earth?" "Roses." Elena smiled and took Lyra's hand. "I can't think of anything I'd rather do, sweetheart." As they walked toward the garden together, Elena thought about the impossible journey that had brought them here. A desperate alien princess, a lonely old woman, and one stubborn belief that love could overcome any obstacle. "You know what I'm proudest of," Elena said as they knelt together beside the rose bushes. "What's that, Grandma Elena?" "You learned the most important human lesson of all. The impossible just takes a little longer." 6 months later, when Elena's tired heart finally stopped beating, she was buried in the memorial garden she had helped plant. Her simple gravestone bore the inscription that Lyra had chosen. "She taught us that family isn't about where you come from, but who you choose to love." And every morning, as representatives from across the galaxy came to New Eden to learn about the strange human concept of chosen family, they would find fresh earth roses on Elena's grave, placed there by an alien princess who had learned that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't telepathy or advanced technology. It was the stubborn human refusal to believe that love couldn't conquer anything, given enough time and determination.